It's always so much fun to make veneers out of polymer clay and to try out cool techniques, but sometimes we need ideas for what to do with them. Today I have for you a great bracelet project that you can make using any polymer clay veneer you have in your stash or that you've been wanting to try out. Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another polymer clay video at keepsakecrafts.net. I love the idea of making jewelry with tiles and just having different things that you can string together to make designs. And like I said, you can use any veneers you want. Mokume Gane is a nice one, and if you want to learn how to make it, I've done a video on it. You can just search it on YouTube. There are tons of videos out there showing you how to do it. If you've been polymer claying for a while, you may just have some Mokume Gane pieces in your stash that you don't know what to do with. This is a block that I had, and I've cut a few slices off of it. I keep it stored in this. This is press and seal, and I love it. I have a box where I just have these sheets stacked, and I can just pull them out and flip through them, and that's exactly what I did for this project. Until I came across, I flipped through them all until I came across one that I said, ooh, that'll be pretty. I even use the press and seal just to store these temporarily on a tile because sometimes my cats get a little too curious and I didn't want to wake up with cat hair all over my things, although it's probably inevitable, but this will protect it some. So here are a few slices that I cut from that block I just showed you. You'll need to decide how wide you want your tiles. I'm thinking for mine somewhere around 1.5 inches. You don't really need much clay in order to do this project. I'm going to alternate mine. I'm going to have 5 slices of the Mokume Gane and 5 of a texture. At least that's what I'm guessing. You'll have to do a little experimenting to see how many you need to go around the wrist for your bracelet. It's going to be more than a bracelet measurement because these are curved and they go down the wrist. So the higher up on your wrist you go, the thicker it gets, so the more width around you're going to need to accommodate. So I'll make a few extra. These are all the same thickness, about the thickest setting of the pasta machine, which is around 2.5 millimeters. I like them thick. You could do them thinner, but I kind of like seeing the designs of the Mokume Gane on the edge, but you could definitely do a thinner veneer. And I just cut slabs from that block that I showed you a moment ago. It's about a 2-inch by 3-inch block. And I've already made some that are 1 3/8 inches wide, so I want to get a couple more that are that width. So I'm just kind of laying them side by side and trying to maximize my use. And just a craft blade. 1 3/8 inches. Ooh, that's close. Okay. And lay this one here at 3/8. I love these little quilting rulers. I first bought them for quilting because I was a quilter for years, but they are really great for polymer clay projects. And now I can butt that up. Not much to trim on this one. You kind of want to just hold it down so it doesn't slide on you. And I'll save these pieces. You might have noticed them on the other tile. I had these little thin pieces. I'll use them for things. You can always just kind of layer them and then re-roll scraps. Next, you want to decide how wide you want your tiles to be. They don't all have to be the same width. You can make them any width you want. I'm going to just cut, I missed a little bit down here. There. I'm going to cut a square edge. Another way these rulers can be really handy because you can line that up and then you'll know you have a 90-degree cut. And I'm going to cut mine about 3/4 inch wide, but you do whatever looks good to you, whatever is in proportion to the veneer that you have. If you have a big pattern, you might want to make them a little wider. They can't be ridiculously wide or you'll have a hard time fitting them around a bracelet. And you just carry on like that, cutting them, and you just go across cutting as many as you need for your project. I cut, like I said, about 5. The next thing you'll want to do is pick them up with a blade and take a minute to soften the edges. So I'm going to just very light taps. Oh, another thing you can do is look at both sides. They're similar, but they are a little different. And see if there's one side you like better. I think I like this side better. There's just a little bit more going on. So back to shaping it just a little, just light taps on the corners to round them, and it just gives it a bit more of a finished look. I'm not pressing hard, I'm just lightly tapping. And then kind of stroke or pet those cut straight edges, just on the top side. It just softens them a little bit, and I think gives it more of a finished look rather than a cookie cutter look. And if these long edges have gotten wonky, I'll just tap them on my tile and try to straighten them out. Now, I've made tile bracelets before, and I have a couple, and I don't ever wear them. I think it's because I don't like the straight. Something about it I don't care for. So to build in a little curve, I just have a bit of a toilet tissue roll. I cut off maybe 1 inch and then flattened it out, and it's just a very slight curve. And I'm going to lay that on there and make sure it conforms to the curve. So you can see the difference. It's a subtle difference, but I think you can see it. I think it matters between having those edges softened and then just having them freshly cut. So once you've cut all your pieces, then you can go ahead and bake these. Here are a couple I baked earlier. Now we need to add the backing, but first what you need is some way of holding the stringing hole channels. And I have discovered this stuff. It's piano wire. I found it at a hobby store, the type that sells stuff for model trains and cars. They sell this. I got 4 1-yard pieces for like $2. It's very hard, so don't use your nice jewelry wire cutters. Use a heavy pair or even a pair of memory wire shears because it's hardened wire, and that's why I like it for this project, because it's not going to bend out of shape unlike craft wire. So you can decide what you're going to use for your backing. Now, in addition to these, I'm going to have some solid colored beads with a texture in between. And I decided to use this, so I rolled out about a half a package of the Primo Peacock Pearl. I actually think the color I used in here was sea glass, but that certainly goes well enough. This is rolled out again on the thickest setting of the pasta machine. And I have a texture sheet here. I don't know if I can find this anymore. Last time I searched for it, I couldn't find it. I think I found it, I think I had gotten it at Fire Mountain Gems, and it's listed like under stuff for metal clay, but it's a really nice kind of fine texture. But I'm sure I'll find links to similar texture sheets that you can find on Amazon. So I'm going to kind of press that in there, and then once I've got it pressed in enough, I'm just going to use my roller. I'm not rolling so much as rubbing because I don't want it to shift. I just want to get a nice deeply embossed texture. And I love adding just the spritz of Armor All to the clay rather than the texture sheet, because if it's spread all over the surface of the clay, then I know that the release is everywhere I need it to be. So there's a nice texture. And you'll cut out your tiles the exact same way using a ruler and a blade and cut them out, just like we did with these. You can cut them the same width, you can cut them different widths. I cut mine all a little bit narrower, and I cut more of different sizes because I'm not sure what's going to work to make this bracelet fit. So I cut 7 and some from 1/2 inch up to 3/4 of an inch. Place them on the curved form and bake them just like the other ones. So I think this is going to be really pretty, having these alternating. And I'll probably do some, I'll definitely do some painting and such to kind of bring out the texture. Yeah, that's going to be really nice. I like that. Okay, so now we need to add a backing. I've done that on this one. Let me show you how to do that. Now we can add our backing. Again, I have a piece of the peacock pearl rolled out on the thickest setting of my pasta machine. And it's at least as wide as one of these tiles. It doesn't have to be wider, but at least as wide as one of these tiles. I'm just going to add a little bit of texture to the back, because it's just more comfortable to wear a polymer clay piece of jewelry if there's a little bit of texture. I've found if you leave it untextured, it tends to be kind of sticky against the skin. I've just found it uncomfortable. So even just a little bit, that's just a green kitchen scrubby, which sometimes leaves bits behind, but that's okay. All right, so I'm going to put one tile here in the middle and just mark both ends. I don't know if you can see that. If you're going to make wider tiles, you might want to have 3 stringing channels. But for this, I'm just going to do 2. I'm going to kind of evenly space where I want my stringing channels to be and really press that down. In fact, I'm going to use my roller. I want that completely pressed into that clay, because of course the back of this is already baked, so there's not going to be any place else for those to go. So make sure they're nice and parallel. I see my markings for the top. I don't know if you can see those, but I'm putting the blade right on that. Actually, just inside it. And there's that one. Just inside. Now this is how you would do this if this were your first batch of tiles, if you were doing them all at once. However, I just remembered that I'm actually going to make these match another group of tiles that I've already baked. So I have to do this a little differently. Oops. That's okay. So if you have to do them in batches, like you probably won't be able to do all of them all at once. There just isn't enough length or enough room on a tile. So I'm just going to flatten that a little and come in with my, I think I had one with, yeah, really long. I left them long for this purpose. Because of course you want your stringing channels to line up. So I'm just kind of marking here. These are pretty close, but obviously these don't line up with the other ones. There. And did I have that? Yep, centered and marked. Okay. Now I can put those back in. So if you're going to be doing them in batches and not all at once, I'll tell you more about this in a moment, but what you'll need to do is leave some of them long so that you can use it as a guide to mark the position of your next batch. Do your best to make sure they're parallel so they're the same from end to end. So many of you have told me that you enjoy my tutorials, and that just thrills me to pieces. If you'd like to get more of my tutorials, my patrons have the opportunity to get up to 2 bonus tutorials every month. You can go to patreon.com/SandySewen and see if it's right for you. As you can see with these ones that I've already done, I cut short lengths of the wire, because it's just a whole lot easier to deal with each bead with its own little bit of wire rather than trying to fit a whole bunch onto these wires. So I can just grab a pair of pliers, give it a twist, and pull them out of the ones that are already done. And I'm actually going to remove these. Just gently. Because it's a whole lot easier to cut these if you don't have wire in the way, obviously. Now I've got my line here. I'm just going to cut right on that. And repeat to cut as many as you need, or if you have narrow ones like these backing ones, you can just use those as a guide if you have different size tiles. You'll want to add a little bit of liquid clay, not too much. If you add too much, it slides all over the place. I had a couple I added too much. I mean, really, like the barest coat. You almost shouldn't even see it after you paint it on. It should be that thin. I'm going to take my short little bits of wire and put it back in the channel on the backing. And yes, we've pressed out a good deal of the texture on the back, but that's okay. And then lay this on the baked, front portion. Make sure those stay where you want them. If you find that your backing is still slipping around on you, just go ahead and let it sit for like 10 minutes. The polymer clay and the baked and the raw polymer clay and the TLS kind of get a tacky bond as they sit. Now you'll notice that even though you cut your piece the same length as your front, it's too long, and that's because of the curve. This is the inner curve, so it's going to be a little long, which is why I said before that you didn't have to make it any longer than the tile. And yeah, I know. You cut against your finger gently. Kind of slightly at an angle here. There. Just to trim those flush. Take your texture. Yes, see, it's still sliding on me, even though I applied the smallest amount. Just go ahead and use that. Again, light taps, not a lot of hard pressure, just light taps on the corners and the edges. If you need to add more texture to the center, go ahead. Just to texture that and soften those edges, and then take your time and really make these each look nice. You can use your blade up against the wires to straighten it back out. You can kind of pinch with your fingers here if it's spread a bit. I like to take the blade and put it kind of up against the that baked edge and just kind of press and bevel it slightly under. So take your time doing that until it's nice and neat, because it's not going to get any better. Unlike a pan of brownies, it's not going to get better with time in the oven. You're going to you're going to get out exactly what you put in. So just make sure you take your time and make it nice. And bake these, and what you'll end up with are tiles like these. Do the same thing for your other tiles, your alternate tiles. And of course you could do them all the same. You don't have to alternate, but I think that is just a really pretty contrast where we have visual texture with the Mokume Gane and actual texture, which we'll probably add some Gilder's paste and such too. Here are my tiles out of the oven, and I've just started to do a test string. I can see, for example, that this one I think I'm going to need to swap around. Because I didn't measure the spacing of the holes precisely, you may end up with some that have to be swapped around in order for them to line up properly. The rest look pretty good. I've strung this on some elastic. I used 1mm wires as spacers for the holes, and then I have 0.8mm elastic, so that will fit fine. I wouldn't go any finer than this. I actually first tried the 0.6mm and was not impressed. It broke even as I was pre-stretching it. Whereas the 0.8 seems to be holding together fine. You don't have to use elastic if you don't want to. You can certainly use a finding with a clasp, in which case I would make sure you have your finding first before you even start to put together your beads. have your finding so that you can space your holes according to the finding. But I'm going to use elastic. But another thing to think about with this kind of a design is, what about making a neck piece instead of a bracelet? That's kind of pretty. And this, of course, shows you all sorts of possibilities for shapes. They don't have to be rectangles. They can be triangles, diamonds, teardrops, ovals, whatever you want. They would make a really intriguing shape. Just put together this way with the channel on one end, you could have a really nice neck piece. They don't all have to be the same size, the same length, the same width. I did make a few extras, which was good because this one isn't cut quite straight, so I was able to eliminate that. I think for my final string, I'm going to add some little tiny copper beads in between each. I think it will tie them all in together and make it fit just about right. You'll, of course, want to do a test fit, but this seemed to work out pretty well. One last thing, kind of many of our least favorite, but sanding. I am going to sand the top of all of the Mokume Gane pieces and the sides, all four of these edges of all of my pieces. If you want to learn more about these sanding pads, I'll have a link to Cindy Leet's The Polymer Clay Tutors video where she shows how to make these. And I have found this to be so useful. It's made me actually do sanding on things, whereas before I would have avoided it. Once you're done sanding all the way down, you probably don't have to go to 5,000. I think 2,000 is probably fine. This just happens to be the grit that I bought. It was an automotive sanding package of grits. And so I go down to this. And then the final step is to buff it. If you have a Dremel that you can buff with, that's fantastic. My husband gave me his to try out. I'm going to have to do that soon. But I found also with a piece of denim and some serious elbow grease, you can actually get a really nice shine on these. And then it's a nice natural shine. It doesn't look fake, I guess, gloppy like sometimes a brush on finish looks. I just don't really care for those looks. And it's always part of the polymer. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this project and that maybe you'll pull out some veneers from your stash and make something beautiful for yourself or for a gift. Thanks so much for watching. Happy creating.